First of all, thank you everyone for joining today's session. We're very, very excited to get this underway. Welcome to the session of Wonk Week. My name is Aditya Kamanduri. I also go by the nickname AK, and I'm a senior account executive here at Quorum. We've given folks a few minutes here, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is AK, and we're here to discuss building out a Get Out the Vote program for 2024, a very hot topic in the industry right now as 2024 is right around the corner. Before we dive in, I want to share a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, this session is going to be recorded, and the recording and the slides will be distributed after the event, so we'll make sure that everyone here gets a copy of that. Second, you're going to see on the right-hand side of your screen a chat box and a Q&A submission form. We're going to encourage you to use this chat throughout the session to share insights, submit questions to Q&A as you think about them. Then we'll go through the questions at the end of the presentation here. We're going to go ahead and get started here by presentations with both Ryan and Luana first. So we're very excited to dive in. And with that being said, really excited to be joined here by Ryan O'Connor and Luana Chiris. First off, Luana is the League of Women Voters U.S. Digital Relational Organizing Manager. And in that role, she focuses on building and harnessing the League's grassroots power to expand voting rights and build towards a democracy where everyone can thrive by strengthening the League's digital and organizing muscle via relational organizing. Additionally, at LWV, she oversees and manages the League's first digital relational organizing app called League in Action, and very excited for her to talk more about this. Next, we have Ryan O'Connor from Capital One. Ryan O'Connor leads political engagement at Capital One, where he joined in January of this year. He works to assure all Capital One associates have the opportunity to engage in the political process if they choose to. Prior to his current role, Ryan spent 5 years at Smiths Group, an aerospace manufacturing company, in their government affairs office. A graduate of the Bush School of Business at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., Ryan started his career as a political fundraiser for presidential and congressional campaigns. And fun fact, when he's not working, Ryan enjoys a good book and trying new recipes in the kitchen. So make sure to ask Ryan for some new recipes in case y'all are on the hunt for it. We're going to go ahead and start off with two presentations. First, we're going to go through Ryan, then go through Luana, and then answer questions as they come up. So I want to give everyone the chance here to give and put in questions as they start thinking about them. First, we'll go to Ryan. Ryan, I'm going to pull up the slideshow here and just let me know here if you can go ahead and see this. We can go ahead and start clicking it up.
Perfect. Yeah, I can see that. First and foremost, just want to say thank you for allowing me this opportunity, AK, as well as the Quorum powers listening in the background. Additionally, just want to put my lawyer hat on, say all opinions are my own. They don't represent Capital One by any means, kind of. I've been running Get Out the Vote programs for, say, nearly a decade now. There are various types of organizations, manufacturing companies, as I've mentioned, nonprofits, and now in a corporate role. As I go through this presentation with you all, I don't want to get into, we can give that for questions, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how to write an email or exactly what events to do. I'm going to go over some broader, higher level points that I think you should be really considering as you look into 2024 and map out your eventual Get Out the Vote program. Like I said, we all have different resources. There are going to be some of you where a manager has come down and said, hey, do this. There are others at companies that want to prioritize this more. It'll be more thought out, more greater resources program. So these are just going to be some broader level things that we can all consider moving forward. You hit the next slide, okay? First and foremost, tailor your campaign. I know this sounds kind of basic, but really consider it going into 2024. From the basic level, you need to understand the breadth of this. How much time can you actively put into this? What things, I'm going to use things kind of generally, but emails or events or along that nature, is your company willing to consider, willing to put time and money and effort into doing? Those conversations need to be frank and honest with your manager, head of your department, whoever should be considered as you move forward. Second is methodology. What's the best way to reach your audience? Like I said, I worked for a manufacturing company. Not everyone in that company had corporate emails. That was a little bit old school with printed out posters, and we would put them in break rooms. We had TVs on manufacturing floors that we would put Get Out the Vote programs on. Slightly different here at Capital One, a little more technology focused of a company. Everyone does have emails. There are numerous ways I can reach people from a technological standpoint. That being said, we are pretty centered in a few different locations, and we have ginormous kind of lounge areas that people filter through as they head up to their offices. So we are going to put messaging in there. Just consider the different ways to reach your audience. It can be just an email at the end of the day for this program. It does not have to be. Think outside the box, think creatively, but think about your audience truly. And messaging, I think it's really important to consider how a Get Out the Vote program interacts with your company's values, right? Check what your board is putting out. Check your corporate values list. Does this align? Is there one bullet point or one value that they're striving for that a Get Out the Vote program can tie into? I'll touch on it in a little bit. Politics is divisive. There are going to be some companies that think, should we do this? There are going to be some companies that think we shouldn't. But at the end of the day, if it aligns with something and it's something you want to do or something your manager or department wants to do, you might take a little bit of selling. So just consider how it impacts the company overall and your corporate structure. And at the end, make it personal. Look down ballot. Presidential races are divisive. It's kind of in their nature. What's not as divisive, mayoral races. Do you have a large presence in a city or a town? Does the presence of that town meet a threshold that you'll ultimately have to set yourself where you can do a custom email to them? We've touched on this in our prep calls, but all politics is local, right? A good old Cambridge boy who made it to the Senate, made it to the Congress said that. So those are just some things I would consider really, really upfront as you go through a 2024 Get Out the Vote program. You hit the next slide, AK. Keep it simple. Whatever it is, keep it simple. This is probably more basic sales than Get Out the Vote stuff, but you really have to spoon feed the audience some of this stuff. Think about your after school specials. What is a bill? There are some people that truly don't understand exactly how we get to a general election, right? Let alone in the great state of Louisiana, they have their own jungle primary mess going on. But break it down. Use bullet points in emails. People don't want to read a bunch of stuff. They're going to look at it and look away. Use the basics. Use the basics here. That being said, allow an opportunity for folks who want to explore more to have that. Do you link to your own Get Out the Vote site? Do you provide your email or a general government relations office email or something along those lines where people who do have questions can reach out? There's life outside the Beltway. Things, I say that. I know Lana's not in DC either, but it's important if you are in DC, don't get bogged down with the stuff we're talking about here and all that. Think about your audience and messaging it towards them. What do they consider? What are they interested in? And just spell it out. I'll get into it in the next slide as well, but keep reminding people of these dates. There is no reason. I keep an active countdown on a lot of my emails until general election 2024. We're under 100 days until the first primaries for both sides of the aisle for the presidential elections. You just got to keep this going. A lot of people, if you started early in the year, may not think about it as much. You're going to want to remind people. I know it seems basic. I know it's repetitive. Trust me, it's important. You'd be astounded how many times you go, oh, when is this? What date is that? You're like, election was 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry. I think I touched on this already. Easy access if you have a Get Out the Votes program or platform. Don't do any tough barriers to entry. I've worked on ones where you've had to be under under a corporate email to log in. You've had to be on a corporate Wi-Fi to log in. I understand that's something you may take up with your IT department to determine security and that sort of stuff, but try to make it as easy as possible. And then finally, use existing communications. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel here. I know my office currently puts out our own newsletter. We're going to use that same vessel to communicate our Get Out the Vote program starting next year. The more communications you include this in, the more coordinated this campaign looks. So if you are one of the people who your manager tells you, hey, we're going to do a Get Out the Vote program, and you're kind of trying to figure it out, it looks like you put in a lot of foresight. So I couldn't encourage you more to anywhere that's pre-existing you can include, do it. It's easy. Notes from your president, notes from your department, your boss, it's all useful. You have the next slide, okay? Take advantage of the dates already on the calendar, right? I mean, civic holidays, they're not the most fun. They're not Halloween, for instance, but they're there. Use them. It's a great impetus to send out an email, or if you're going to do a voter registration drive in person, seems to make sense. You would do it on voter registration day. So take advantage of that. Some of your primaries, we Capital One will do a Get Out the Vote campaign on. I would say just be cautious. Really consider your audience, and I would argue civic duty to do both sides of the aisle. Days where both primaries fall on the same date are easy, but if it is a one party day, really consider doing the equivalent for the other party that day in that state. I'll say same thing if you're considering hosting a debate or something along those lines, or giving a tour to a candidate. You're going to want to walk the line and do both sides here. That's just a best practice. It's going to go a long way into reinforcing this is a Get Out the Vote program, not a vote for someone program. And that's going to be something that, without a doubt, you'll have to respond to with some questions. You get the next slide, okay? Some other questions I get all the time for these things. Giveaways, I've done them in the past. There are rules. You cannot give something away because someone voted. I think Krispy Kreme was the one that got in trouble in 2016 when they did this. Something we did as a workaround was, even if you didn't vote, but you told us a story about a time you voted or what voting means to you, we included a giveaway. Platforms, oodles of platforms in DC for Get Out the Vote programs or websites. Number of maps you can click down to. There are also plenty of free resources, so please don't feel like money is a barrier to entry for one of those. I also link to government websites all the time. They are the official website for a lot of these counties and states, so I encourage you to look at those. After the election, follow up with folks. Send an email the next day saying, hey, I just want to let you know in this state, here are the people that won the ticket, whatever. Just don't forget about them. People don't want to feel like it was such a buildup and kind of a letdown. And voter leave. This is something that I faced a lot of questions about. Current company, we have one. Previous company, we did not. Talk to HR. If you send out Get Out the Vote emails and you're going to be on the hook answering, well, do I get a couple hours off to go vote? That needs to be decided up front. That is something HR should decide, but you should be able to communicate and know the answer to. I know we'll have time for questions after this. I encourage you, please ask me anything. And then I'll also follow up with I'll have it included, AK, somewhere to follow up materials. My work email, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have after this.
Ryan, thank you so much. That was really helpful. And I think we're going to use a lot of this as a basis for the conversation and the question and answer period. It's going to come after Luana's presentation. Thank you so much. We're now going to move on to Luana. So give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to go ahead and get this set up. Luana, I'll ask you to confirm really quickly that you can see this too. And perfect. And then I'll have you guide, but floor is all yours. Thank you so much, Luana.
Thanks, AK. Hi, everyone. Luana Chaitis, Digital Relational Organizing Manager at LWVUS, like AK mentioned. Again, thank you all for taking the time to even consider, even the folks who were asked to do a Get Out the Vote program. Thank you for playing a role in democracy. Again, your consumers, your employees trust you. There's already a relationship there. You are a trusted messenger when it comes to this information. So even considering or incorporating a Get Out the Vote program is, extremely needed in this time, especially with a lot of new election rules happening. A lot of folks are going out. They're going to be voting on a lot of different things for 2024. We can go on to the next slide, AK. So just a little context, again, as a nonpartisan organization, for folks who don't know, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan 104-year-old grassroots organization. So we dedicate working to protect and expand voting rights to ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. So we have over 150 leagues in your communities. In all 50 states, we are there. Our mission is to ultimately empower voters and defend democracy via organizing, litigation, advocacy, and education. So as really echoing Ryan's presentation, you don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to Get Out the Vote programs. There's a lot of existing moments, organizations like the League that you can lean on as you build out your own Get Out the Vote program. You can go on to the next slide. So just a quick little overview of just some Get Out the Vote best practices. And I know we'll go into the Q&A deeper, but kind of like what Ryan said, like starting early. So if you do want to do a robust Get Out the Vote program and you are focusing on the primaries or focusing on the general, it's a good time to start having conversations now. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You already have existing communication channels. So whether it be your HR systems, your email, maybe upcoming events or conferences you're having with your organization, maybe you have a mobile app, building in opportunities with your brand about the ensuring of getting out the vote. The key phrase that everyone's talking about is making a voting plan. So when you have these moments like the civic holidays that Ryan was mentioning, so Vote Early Day, National Voter Registration Day, those are easy tentpole moments where you can, again, there's other corporations, other organizations that are talking about this. It shows up in communities across the country. You get to really lean into that moment. So again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and really think about who is the best messenger for this information. So if it's employees, whether it be, so let's say, for example, employees, is it the CEO who should be giving this message? Is it the director of a certain department? Really lean in on who you're in your leadership and on staff who can be talking about this program. Specifically, when you're leaning on civic organizations like the League, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So if you're having moments, so let's say, for example, a voter registration drive, you really want to celebrate National Voter Registration Day. You don't have to come up with the full presentation. Feel free to invite a state or a local league. These are real community members in your area. So whether you're in Hawaii, Alaska, Texas, Florida, you can lean on real members in your community to talk about. So you don't have to do the presentation yourself. Going back on branding, again, your consumers and your employees trust you. They already know, they're already in line with what you are talking about. So think about, again, maximizing your brand. So for example, we provide to all voters, again, we're a nonpartisan organization, a nonpartisan voting information platform called Vote for 1-1. You can go on to the next slide, AK. So specifically for folks who don't know what Vote for 1 is, Vote for 1 is like a one-stop election-related information. So this already serves millions of voters throughout your communities. We are represented in over all 50 states plus DC. It's available in English and Spanish, but ultimately it's where voters get their information. Like Ryan mentioned, politics is local. So not only does this have everything that a voter might need for making their voter plan, from a polling location finder, a nonpartisan voter guide of what's on the ballot. Again, it's not just candidates on the ballot, it's ballot initiatives from multiple different states that people are going to want to know more about. So you don't have to recreate this. Again, this platform can be, it's available to your organization. You can put your branding on it, you can put a white label on it. Again, people trust your organization to do this information already. You can go on to the next slide. So you're really leaning in onto your brand. Again, some key features that are really, again, voters tell us this works is specifically an online voter registration tool, candidate information nationwide, not just at the top of the ticket, but all the way to the bottom of the ticket. So from mayors to your local candidates for school board, these are the issues that folks really want to know about, who's representing from them, especially from a nonpartisan angle. So as you are building out your Get Out the Vote plan, really think about, especially when you're putting together your calendar, whether it be your emails, whether it be your events, is what are the steps that a voter will take to make a voting plan, and figure out those opportunities to go deeper. So if I need to if I'm registered to vote, but I don't have a voting plan of how I'm going to do it that day, whether I'm going to be voting early, whether I'm going to be voting in person or voting by mail, really lean on those dates to make moments out of it. Again, you do not have to do this yourself. You can really take advantage of organizations like the League to help you put together this program. You can go on to the next slide. And again, this isn't just us saying, because I work for the League. We have these are real voters in your community who talk about the platform. Again, it's a trusted, nonpartisan, one-stop shop for folks to get information. Again, what really resonates well with employees is that, yeah, I can Google the deadline. I can Google maybe what's on my ballot. But getting direct information from candidates on where they stand on position from a nonpartisan angle, this is where the voter guide is extremely helpful when folks are doing the presentation. So I know we have worked with organizations, companies like Target and Sweetgreen, for their employees, putting together presentations on what they need to do to make a voting plan and how they can leverage their relationships with their own friends and family to talk about making a voting plan. It's kind of a given that in the age of polarization that we live in, the issues that are happening in our community, people are looking for information, and they're looking for their trusted sources to get that information. And go on to the next slide. And again, it is all personal. So again, bringing local information in the community. So even if you don't have nationwide coverage, there is something for you specifically on the issues that matter most to your consumers and your employees. But I'll pass it back to AK and we get to the questions.
Perfect. Luana, that was really, really helpful. And I think we see a couple common themes here. One, all politics is local, right? The great Tip O'Neill's words live pretty strong. Two, about creating personalized plans and the voting plans here. So I think we have a lot to go off of. And one of the first questions that I think that we'll start here, and as questions come in, audience, please put them in the chat here, is that this election feels a little wonky or weird right off the bat, right? I think in previous election cycles, we've had different types of conversations around, is voter turnout going to be an issue, right? Seems like that's less so the case with the past few election cycles. But one of the new unique things is the wealth of changes, right, to voter ID laws or different changing landscapes across the country here. So high level, and maybe Luana, we'll start with you and then have Ryan go after. Can you talk to us a little bit about what we can expect in 2024 or what we should watch out for in terms of changes to the political landscape?
Yeah, so great question. I think that's always everyone wants to have a crystal ball of what can we really plan out and get ready for all these surprises that may happen or may not happen. Another thing to keep in mind is there are millions of voters who were first-time voters in 2020. That was their first election. The way they may have casted their ballot in 2020, it's most likely not the same as they're going to do it in 2024. So a big thing to keep in mind is there's going to be a lot of confusion of what is actually what folks need, whether they're in a state that has voter ID, whether there are some states that got rid of early voting or have changed of how they do early voting. So again, it's now more than ever extremely important that we talk about the correct information of how you would make your voting plan. So that's a big thing to kind of keep in mind for 2024 is that things have changed, and the way you did it in 2020 is not the same you're going to do it in 2024.
Super helpful. Ryan?
Yeah, no, I'll double down on that. In terms of the election itself, the experts are saying 2024 is 2022, 2020
part two.
So I don't want to get into potential voter outcome. I would say, frankly, for a Get Out the Vote program, that does not matter. Your goal of this program should be encouraging your people to go out and cast a vote for whoever they choose. That is their civic duty, I would argue. But I'll double down on the point. I believe that with this election coming up, you are going to have a larger percentage of people who are just unclear on these new rules. We're going through it right now in Virginia with redistricting, and we run a state election Get Out the Vote or a program. So literally sending out emails today. So this is a full circle for me. But send the correct information. Be the trusted voice. Don't get into the partisan stuff. You'll lose people. As soon as you want to even hint at partisan politics in these Get Out the Vote programs, you're immediately going to turn people off. Just be a resource, provide them the correct information, or at least a link where to find it.
That's incredibly helpful here. And I think those two answers have now got the ball rolling on folks getting questions into the platform. So we'll now move on to the questions coming in the chat here. First, we'll start off with Laura's question. Does Quorum/Phone to Action have a plan to expand their Get Out the Vote grassroots tool to include ballot initiatives and the information that Vote 411 provides? We'll answer this a little quickly here. We do have a product that helps with more of like the voter information, helping folks find information on their local candidates and make sure they're registered to vote. I'm not sure exactly if it matches with the Vote 411 stuff, and we'll probably take that a bit offline because I want to make sure this session's primarily focused on more of like the strategy and the takeaways for Get Out the Vote programs in 2024, kind of irrespective of some of the tools or technologies of choice here. But Laura will follow up with you after on that great question. Second, we'll have Carly, which I think is a really, really good question here. And the name of the game in, I would say, advocacy, Get Out the Vote, even government relations, has been like the three-letter word, which is ROI, right? The return on investment. So Carly asks, what indicators have you used to measure the success or the impact of your GOTV programs? What numbers can we put behind it to show leadership that this is going really well?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially in the corporate world. One we get asked all the time, is it worth the time and money you're putting in? It really depends on your program. If you do an electronic one and you're sending email blasts and you have a platform you're linking to or a website and you can track that data, and a lot of platforms let you, that's the simplest way, right? It's clear. The other side of it is if you're not doing it as technological as that, and it is a little more rudimentary, talking to people, bringing someone in, you do have to kind of just keep track to the best of your ability and communicate that out. When I did those giveaways, I kept track of how many foam capitals I mailed across the United States to different sites. You just have to be able to back up with some sort of number. Ultimately, a Get Out the Vote program isn't a money-making initiative, though. You really, from the beginning on the corporate side, at least have to decide, is this something we are doing? That's why I said, does it align with corporate value whatsoever? Something you have to decide you are doing because it is for the greater good.
Yeah, I'll just add on. In terms of, I will say shameless plug, in terms for the way when we work with corporations, for Vote 411, we track the engagement, we track online voter registration. So going back to really leaning into civic organizations, because great civic organizations do have a lot of set infrastructure to track the impact and how well their Get Out the Vote program is doing. So I'll say, for example, our League in Action app, when we do that organizing, again, we ultimately want folks to get information, but also for them to be comfortable to talk about with their friends and family. And going back to that saying that we all have a role to play in our democracy. So if you are interested of like, well, how many of my employees actually did make a voting plan? How many of my employees found this information helpful? You know, there's already set programs like Vote 411, tools like League in Action it's kind of a plug and play that you can get this information from your partners if you do incorporate, that type of tool into your Get Out the Vote program.
Those are both really helpful. And I think one of the things that we've even seen on our end here is folks, kind of to Ryan's point here, post-election, sending out follow-ups and kind of getting a sense of whether they did vote, how their experience was, and kind of soliciting any feedback from like the folks that you're working with here, so you can tie a more direct like attribution or a number rate to the folks that you have been engaging via email campaigns or in-person campaigns, and kind of like the direct feedback loop that you're getting of like how many actual votes that resulted in. And I think like there's multiple different ways to answer the KPI or the key performance indicator question or the ROI question, but it's more about just having those there instead of kind of being caught off guard when folks ask, right? I think is one of the first things that we think about in getting a Get Out the Vote program up and running. Carly, spectacular question. We'll move on to Jim Hornberger next. Are there impartial sites that you'd recommend in addition to Vote 411, such as VoteSmart or justfacts.votesmart.org? Are there reasons to recommend one versus another, right? And I'm not going to have both of you, I guess, be the endorsers of specific technologies, and we'll keep it relatively agnostic, but curious as to both of your takes here on the pros and cons.
Oh, I can start. Again, for Vote for One specifically, I don't know about other platforms, but what is in whatever platform you do, website or tool that you do incorporate into your plan, making sure it goes down all the way down to the ballot. So if you are going to include a platform that it has coverage of what's happening in local communities, not just the statewide or federal level, like people get those. Like I know I'm going to be voting for my senator. I'm voting for president. Like that's where the coverage. But as organizations, I think the most effective Get Out the Vote angle is a nonpartisan angle, because we want everyone to use their voice and just to get out there, regardless of how you're going to vote for, making sure you have a voting plan. So, if you are going to include one, like if you do include Vote for One, make sure to have a local perspective and local voices who are contributing to that platform.
Yeah, and I'll say on our end, the third-party platforms we link to, we pay for. So that's why we trust them. We do our vetting process. We understand why it's best, and that's what we link to. In terms of sites where you can find more information on a candidate or the election writ large, we link right to the candidates' personal websites. They all have them. I would encourage you, if you do one, you have to do them all. Again, in no way should it be conceived you are choosing one candidate or the other to the best of your ability. And then to the election websites themselves, or the election website, whether that's at the state or county or city level. We find those are the most trusted. They are nonpartisan, legally have to be, and it's direct from the source.
And then to that point too, I think this is a kind of a segue into the world we live in, right? A lot of organizations, both on the nonprofit side and even the corporate side, sometimes shy away from even the idea of a Get Out the Vote program, right? Because of like the polarized world that we live in right now. I think Kennedy asks a great question, which is how can we proactively limit like the polarized reactions to content that they share and publish, right? Coming from a communication standpoint, people get very passionate very quickly, and everyone has a lot of opinions, right? So can you talk to us about how you toe that line and not turn a Get Out the Vote program into a mechanism of divisiveness?
Yeah, I'll start on this one. Even if you try it to the best of your ability and you think you execute it perfectly, you are still going to get someone, probably more than one, who complains or finds fault with what you do. That's okay. It's going to happen. Do not let that be the reason you don't go through with this. Answer them. No matter the scathing email I get, and it's astounding what some people will put on a corporate server, you need to respond to these emails. Let them know there's a person behind this campaign and that, in fact, your office is not pushing one candidate or the other. in all my communications, I used to always end them with, the government relations office encourages you to vote. We are not telling you who to vote. We do not care who you vote for. In those words, I don't care. We don't care. We just are encouraging you to go vote. But then you do have to do some of your homework. Like I said, if you're going to link to one campaign, do them all. If you are going to provide any information on one, do it all. Put candidates in alphabetical order by last name. Just kind of put that in your brain. Can this be perceived as partisan or leaning towards a candidate or a ballot initiative, whatever it may be? It does take a little bit of time to turn your brain onto that way. But once you do, you'll see it. It becomes kind of easy. Or have second eyes on it. Use a team.
I will say for us, I'm a little blessed where the League of Women Voters has been around for over 100 years. We've been doing nonpartisan election information literally for decades. So just because, politics has changed, the level of polarization has gotten higher, like we've always done these services for our community. We've always been that trusted messenger. So selfishly, like if you are really anticipating some, again, depending on what state you're in, what community you're in, there might be a very contested election. There might be a lot of attention in maybe a certain district. Leaning into civic organizations that have, again, a nonpartisan, trusted image in their community, you don't have to take that heat. So again, we have our volunteers and our chapters. They are the community. They are, they represent their community. So specifically for us, and again, as you build this out, who are you working with? And, do they have a nonpartisan image to it that it can help you get rid of the initial knee-jerk reactions to folks? But again, that key phrase of making a voting plan is proven to it's your magic sauce right there.
I think that's a great point. And I think this next question here is more so for Ryan, even though I will say both of y'all, thank you so much for the answers here. And thank you everyone in chat for continuously putting the questions. We love the engagement. Keep it coming. Ryan, it seems like there's a lot of good reception here on kind of your points on fielding the more technical questions from staff about voting, time off, the voting plan, the creation. Are there specific strategies or messages that you found useful to engage fellow Cap One employees?
In terms of selling my get out the vote plan, or when communicating to my associates to get them to get out and vote?
I would say in terms of, let's start with the get out the vote plan. And then if we have time to answer that question, we'll talk about the actual getting the associates to go there.
Right. Yeah. Let me first say I'm blessed to be here from a government relations and get out the vote standpoint. We're a very proactive company. Leadership from the tippy top is bought in on a get out the vote program. That being said, I have worked at companies where that has not been the case whatsoever. And it has been a small minority of folks who believe we should do this program, and a larger majority who think that's way too divisive. I absolutely don't want to engage in that whatsoever. The manufacturing company I worked for was British based. When we tried to explain this to them, they thought we were breaking the law and almost told us to immediately stop it. So from that point, you really have to break it down and put it in terms that people can understand. These are programs. Elections are in the news now 24/7, 4 years around, right? I mean, how often are we seeing campaign commercials? So this is something that no matter what company you work for, your coworkers, your teammates, it's going to be at the forefront of their mind. It's going to be talked about around the water cooler, whether the water cooler is in person or Slack nowadays. You know what I mean? This is something on the top of it. If you do nothing, we're at the point where that looks just as bad than completely screwing this up and telling people, vote for this candidate, right? You don't want to be perceived as the company who is sticking their head in the sand. It's if you want to fall into the deep dives of Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, those companies who do nothing are getting hit just as hard. I understand the point we talked about earlier on the return on investment. This is not a money-making initiative, nor should it be. You really, really have to drive home that this is important for the greater good. Our associates are going to be talking about this. The best thing you can do is provide them accurate information direct from the source. Be bipartisan, hammer home. We understand why this is important. Here's the candidates you can consider. Here are the races that you may not know about. The other side of it is from a corporate standpoint. These elections matter. It doesn't matter your field, right? Elected officials have a lot of influence over your company. I argue that when I talk about our government relations office overall, not just to get out the vote. So this is important. That being said, don't tell, like, you can't sway them on a candidate, but it does impact you, not just on a personal level, but in a professional one as well.
I think that's a really good point. I want to segue off that a little bit here. And we've talked a lot about, like, what to do, what to start thinking about when you've already been told to build out the Get Out the Vote program here. But we've also acknowledged there's a lot of hesitation from leadership or departments who may not necessarily even be convinced on, like, the value of this. So this is a question for both of you, and maybe Luana, we'll start with you here and then have Ryan, you kind of opine here. But what goes into getting, like, organizational buy-in for a Get Out the Vote program, or what are some effective strategies there if you're at an organization where leadership or other teams are not necessarily convinced on the kind of what you said, the ROI of Get Out the Vote?
Great question. Look, people show up in their full selves, like, regardless of how much you want to ignore politics. Like, communities are changing. Politics is impacting at a very personal level for certain voters. Issues that are going to be impacting not only just everyday community members, but like the economy, the environmental policies in your area. Like, you are going to feel it in some shape, way, or form. Your employees are going to feel it in some shape, way, or form. So just truly just being honest in that conversation of the same way, I would argue, the same way that say my employer is providing healthcare or is providing opportunities to build relationships with other employees. Like, this is just as important as well. That goes into, like, my civic well-being. So I think it's when you're having these conversations with your leadership, you don't just leave that at the door. If something's being voted that's going to impact my community or it's going to impact my everyday life. I come from a military family. These elected officials will have an impact on the role that I can show up in, how as a full individual at work. So that's, like, being super honest about that. That, like, no matter how much you want to ignore the election's not going to ignore you. So I think just being very transparent in that. And again, leaning into the existing organizations like the league or the resources you already have. Like, if we're going to be really bottom line about it, you don't have to recreate the wheel, and you probably shouldn't. You don't want to build that out all by yourself. So I think when we talk about that leadership conversation, you got to be just straight up honest about it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm actually going to steal that line. You can try to ignore the election, but it can't ignore you. Capital One Associates may be seeing that on a future communication. I think to if you were trying to sell this to leadership, you need to find a leader that is also bought in. And that leader doesn't necessarily have to be a president. It doesn't have to be in title, but there's someone at your company that is a leader of people and people enjoy listening to and has influence. If they're fired up about this, they should be the ones that these emails come from. That's finding who to deliver this message, I think, is almost just as key. If they are in leadership, it's easier for you to sell it to them if they're not bought in. But all those points Lena made are fantastic.
I think finding the influencers in the organization is a key strategy here. And then to your point, Luana, in the presentation, you talked about, like, the need to personalize and make it personal. Like, that personalization is, like, so key, even in convincing for the need for a Get Out the Vote program, because, like you said, politics affects everyone and their families in multiple different ways that often, like, extend outside the corporate office boundaries in and of itself. I think this is great, guys. I want to quickly say we have a 15-minute warning here. So if we have any final questions, put them in the chat here. I feel like time flies when you're having fun. And thank you all for the great questions here. The next question we're going to go to is going to be around, in addition to Get Out the Vote's goal of encouraging people to vote, does Get Out the Vote encourage people to make well-informed voting decisions? And I think that's a good nuance there, right? In between just like get out and vote and know what you're doing before you get out and vote, right? And whoever wants to chime in first here would love to have you opine here, but I think it's a great nuance and split between getting out the vote and a well-informed vote.
Oh, I'll jump in here. This is like obviously my bread and butter here. So one of the main pages that we have on Vote for One, again, we're not just going to throw information. And I sound like a broken record, truly. We want to make this as easy as voters as possible. So we have like a checklist. And one of the like crucial steps in making a checklist is researching the candidates, researching, what's actually on your ballot. I'm a Texas voter right now. We have several constitutional amendments on the ballot this election. And a lot more information coming in 2024. So as you are talking about your Get Out the Vote program, again, really leaning into that messaging of making a voting plan. And voting plan requires you to know what's on the ballot and researching what that is. So again, it's not just go vote, but again, make a plan to vote. Again, it's going to be your magic sauce here.
Yeah, I'll second that, and you kind of sparked a memory. I mean, I also used a checklist in a past Get Out the Vote program, and I forgot the header. I think it was something along the lines of, "Are you an informed voter?" Something along something like that, right? And it was, "Are you registered? Do you know your polling location? Do you know your elections? Are there ballot measures on your ballot that you need to know?" And then providing that information right from the source. Allowing people the opportunity to go look. I will say, that being said, you can lead the horse to water. You can't make it drink. The best you can do is provide people the opportunity to find all that information.
I think that's a really good point too. And kind of on that note, I feel like organizations sometimes toe the line between how much is too much communication to a group of people and how much is not enough, right? So what are some tips and tricks that both of you as veterans of Get Out the Vote programs would tell the audience here in terms of communicating enough, but not too much to where you're diluting engagement or like getting that kind of ignored, right? What are some tips and tricks there?
Yeah, I'll go back to my first slide or second slide of my presentation. You have to know your company. You have to understand their style. I've worked for companies where employees are getting blasted with emails all the time, right? And we did include our message on those emails. But if they're going unread, then so is your message. So we turned to how to deliver a message that cuts through all the noise. And we figured out a system that worked for us. And likewise at Capital One, we have, like I said, multiple platforms where messages can be shared. I can't give you a tip and trick. Every company is different in this. You need to think about it and need to be creative. Understand your audience and how communications are getting to them already. Are those communications being read or digested in any way? If not, how do you get your message out? I feel like it's a cop-out answer from me, but truly, you need to understand your own organization.
Yeah, there's an organizing principle of meeting people where they are. So as you try to, you start mapping out your Get Out the Vote program. Emails are probably a given; they're going to happen. But this is where you can lean into events and activities that you have. So I've seen some great partners who bring in and do presentations. It's visibly in your face about what's actually provided. Another way to, again, we haven't really talked about this, but as folks are really, your employees are most likely, some of them are going to be fired up for the election. Some of them are going to be confused on what's going on. But there's also other opportunities to get involved. I know it's about Get Out the Vote, but you can sign up to be a poll worker. There is a lot of engagement that you can do right now. And again, this is on a nonpartisan lane. So You don't have to worry about seeing like, are we leaning towards one party or another? Again, depending on your district or depending on your state, you might have really, really heated elections. So just again, emails are great, but you have ways you already engage with your employees, whether it be an all staff, whether it be a quarterly event that you always do. Like build that in. You don't have to create new spaces, and you'll get some more traction that way.
I think that's a spectacular point to a very ongoing question in terms of like how we can get that done. And to that point, for organizations that may be like new to this may be a first type of program here. What advice would you give an organization that's just starting out, right? I think there's different levels here, and like everyone wants to reach the zenith or the nirvana level of get out the vote program where everything is really advanced, the processes are there, the technology is in place, the KPIs are there. But for an organization starting out, what's a good checklist of things that are just solid things to have so that we can say we feel good about our get out the vote program for the first time? Like what's a good basic start?
I'll jump here.
I was going to defer anyway.
Really start early. Like if it's your first time doing this, like start as early as possible, have these conversations. And again, like if you don't, I keep on saying this, but you really don't have to reinvent the wheel here. If your employees, to truly say you did a get out the vote program, that you made an intentional effort for folks to have everything they need to make a voting plan. So if you are encouraging to vote in person on election day, then again, going back to what Ryan said, that you've already spoken to HR about what that policy is going to look like. If you are encouraging folks to participate on, early national, I think it's like vote early day, then you already thought about that process. So start early. Whatever you're asking, think about it. Would I have that question about it? If you had just moved to the area, what questions would you have? And that's how I always try to like, if I'm in a, again, I get to do this nationwide. So if I'm someone who just brand new moved to an area, what questions would I have? And then I put that into my FAQ. Then I put that into my program. So that's where, again, start early, use the resources that already exist. Look at other fellow companies, your partners that you work with. What are they doing? Talk to them. But again, we've already echoed this. Like, find the right leadership, find the right individual, right spokesperson to do this program, and start as early as possible. Because if you're knocking on someone's door 2 months out election day, you talk to people in October 2024, you're going to give them a heart attack.
Starting early and I think like making sure you have the proper plan to not reinvent the wheel, right? Reinvent the wheel comes in many different ways, and this is not some like IP type of program. People are already doing this. It's already been successful. Take what you can. Let's be creative and in the shared effort here. We're going to go to the last question here, considering we only have 5 minutes. Ryan, sorry, I didn't get to answer or have
No, you're fine.
Want to make sure we're on time here. Jacob Foster in the chat here asked a spectacular question, which is around the vote pledge, right? A lot of organizations have gotten the pledge to vote through like a form initially and have used that as an initial base for who is interested here. Can you talk about the efficacy of the vote pledge compared to other get out the vote tactics? Have y'all used it in programs before? Would love your opinions on it.
I can't speak to it firsthand. I have not used it in a program.
We do use it. Again, because we have so many chapters all over the country, majority of them use a pledge card. Again, I think what's most effective about having a pledge card is that you have the contact information to folks to give folks election reminders afterwards. So like, even if you spoke to me that day and I made a pledge to vote, I now have the best contact information to follow up with you afterwards, which is literally half the game sometimes. Especially if you do your activities and your messaging, like a month out in advance, a month and a half. Like, I think the sweet spot, like truly to make sure that you are referencing back those pledge cards, it's 2 weeks before the election. I think there's already good research that shows like that is when folks actually remind themselves like, oh, I actually have to go out and vote if they're not voting by mail, right? If they're voting by mail, it's a whole other messaging calendar. But it's just most effective to get the most up-to-date contact information, because when folks are filling them out, sometimes they won't put their work email. They'll just put like their regular email they always check and the best contact number that may not reflect what's on their HR file, because they would have rewritten it for themselves as a voter. So just, I think they're effective if you already have agreed that you're going to do the follow-up for it and you do already have a plan for it. So if you're going to do something, make sure you have someone assigned to do it afterwards.
It's also a fantastic way to track some metrics.
And y'all are a little popular, so we have one last question before we get it out, but I'll ask you both, if possible. It's kind of a deep question, but if possible, to try to keep the answers to like 30 seconds to a minute so we can wrap up here. But how do both of you combat voter apathy given the climate change right now, given the climate and the change in the climate right now, political climate? There are candidates who are not liked on either side. The people feel like their vote doesn't matter. And Ryan, I think you made a great point to the localization about politics, but 30 seconds to a minute, would love to understand how both of you are thinking about combating voter apathy.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and we've talked about it in this group already. There's ballots in 2024 will not be just one presidential ticket, right? There's plenty on a ballot to get people energized to go vote. Use it. And you almost, I hate to say it, kind of have to ignore the voter apathy. All you can do is tell them, here's what's on your ticket. We encourage you to go vote. Here's why it's important. It's ultimately going to be their decision.
And again, they're not wrong. Like, you know, there are issues that are just like pissing people off, to be honest. But for us, going back to the issues of why, like, people might be like disillusioned by a certain candidate. Great. We don't endorse any of those candidates. But these issues are on the ballot, whether you like it or not. Again, you can ignore the election. It's not going to ignore you. So even when folks feel like, well, why should I? Gerrymandering. Who cares? I'm not actually voting for president, which is not true. But, why should I care? Well, because your mayor and your school board is going to affect your life, like literally in the next 3 months. So really bringing it back to politics is local. You're going to feel these things, even if you ignore it. So I think bringing back and acknowledging that, like, yes, but doesn't mean we step out from the game. Like, this matters to our community.
And with that, a jam-packed session around Get Out the Vote is going to be brought to an end. I want to quickly thank Ryan and Luana for their incredible takes and opinions here. And I think we all learned a lot. I want to thank everyone for joining. We will be sharing out materials after Wonk Week ends. And in 1 minute, we have our next session coming up, which is going to be from transitioning from legislation to regulation and how to build a strong regulatory engagement strategy with Michael Taylor, who's a senior advisor at Hill Staffer. Would love to see y'all there. Thank you so much for joining. Happy Halloween. Have a great spooky season. Talk to y'all soon. Thanks, everyone.
Happy Halloween.